Welcome back. So, think for a second about the stories your grandparents told you, about who you are, the family
Yeah,
mythology.
everybody has those.
Right. Maybe they told you you're descended from royalty or like brave pioneers or brilliant scholars. We really build the whole architecture of our identities on those stories.
We do. It's how we anchor ourselves.
Exactly. And usually we expect uncovering our history to be like a medical diagnosis.
Right.
You break your arm, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor points to it. Broken or not broken?
Yeah, it's clean. It's binary.
Right. Doesn't leave room for ambiguity. But what happens when you spit into a plastic tube, mail it off to a genetics lab, and that x-ray machine of your identity it completely shatters?
Well, you expect a neat little pie chart, right? One that perfectly validates your curated family fairy tale. Yeah.
Exactly. But sometimes you get anomalies. You get a biological reality that violently collides with the stories you've been told. And that collision between the aristocratic fantasy we cling to and the cold, hard biological data of our actual survival, well, that is our mission today.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. We are doing a deep dive into a brilliant, deeply layered 15-minute audio play called The Purity of Don Quixote de San Juan de la Mancha.
Such a great title.
It is. And since it is an audio play, to really capture the raw emotion and, honestly, the dark comedy of this piece, we're going to jump straight into the script. I'll take both sides of this generational war.
Oh, this I have to hear.
Yeah, I'm going to embody the booming, melodramatic grandiosity of a grandfather who literally calls himself Don Quixote. And then I'll switch over to the dry, modern, incredibly deadpan voice of his granddaughter, Maria.
Who is basically just trying to stop him from destroying her electronics.
Exactly. So the contrast between those two voices is really where the genius of this piece lies. Because beneath the sheer absurdity of a man attacking a computer with a sword, we have this profound psychological exploration of denial, colonialism, and what it actually means to have a noble lineage.
Yeah, the layers there are wild. So how does it start?
So we open in a living room. The stage directions give us the high-pitched, frantic clicking of a computer mouse.
Just aggressively clicking.
Yeah, followed immediately by the heavy swoosh of metal through the air.
Oh, wow.
The grandfather is standing over a laptop, fully unhinged, and he roars. And I'm paraphrasing the grandiosity here. Stand thy ground, monstrous algorithms of the internet, you giants of database desynchronization.
Database desynchronization. That is amazing.
Right. He says, you think to dilute the pure Gothic blood of the House of Ramirez de Arellano with your digital witchcraft. I, Don Quixote de San Juan de la Mancha, shall run you through.
He actually swings the sword.
He literally brings a sword down onto the plastic shell of the laptop.
Unbelievable.
And in walks his granddaughter, Maria, holding a beer. She sighs, totally deadpan, and says, Abuelo, please don't stab the MacBook. It's still under warranty.
That is the perfect response.
It really is. But he spins around, furious, and yells, Maria, do not call me abuelo in the heat of battle. I am defending the ultimate, most fragile treasure of our island's history, our limpieza de sangre, our purity of blood.
Oh, boy. The purity of blood defense.
Yeah. And Maria just takes a sip of her beer and replies,
Right.
La Mancha, which in your case is just the coffee stain on your linen pants.
Just punctures the whole thing.
In 1 second.
Yeah.
She completely deflates his grandiosity. I mean, he's constructed this entire persona out of a Spanish colonial fairy tale, wearing linen pants like they're literal plate armor to shield himself from the modern world.
Well, and the armor analogy is perfect because he is desperately defending a worldview that is biologically extinct. I mean, when he invokes limpieza de sangre, he isn't just throwing around a poetic phrase about bloodlines.
Right. It has actual historical weight.
Exactly. He is invoking a very specific, incredibly rigid legal and social framework that originated in 15th century Spain. After the Reconquista, when Christian kingdoms consolidated control over the Iberian Peninsula, they instituted this, well, essentially a proto-racial caste system.
So, you had to prove who you were.
Yeah, to hold public office, to join a guild, or even to get on a boat to the Americas, you had to prove you were an old Christian. You literally had to present documentation proving you have no Jewish or Muslim ancestors.
Which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
It was a bureaucratic obsession with genetic vetting before genetics even existed.
Precisely. And that system didn't just stay in Spain, It was exported directly to the colonies. In Puerto Rico, especially in the isolated western mountains that Quixote is so proud of, those hierarchies really ossified.
And he views himself as the ultimate guardian of this unbroken, pristine thread back to the Spanish crown. I mean, his entire sense of self-worth is predicated on not being part of the quote-unquote unvetted masses.
Because his identity is entirely externalized into this historical myth. If you strip away the Gothic blood of the House of Ramirez de Arellano, he fears he becomes ordinary.
Or worse, he fears that his perceived superiority is built on a complete fabrication.
Right. The rigidity of his worldview makes him incredibly brittle. He can only exist as a conqueror, never the conquered.
Which makes Maria's next move so devastating.
Yeah.
She tells him she finally ran the DNA sample he allowed her to submit.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, Quixote gets incredibly eager, asking to see the pristine Spanish Y chromosomes and his aristocratic blueprint. And Maria just looks at the screen and delivers the fatal blow. She tells him, I can show you a blueprint, all right,
Right.
but it looks less like a castle in Madrid and more like a synagogue in Seville.
Wow. An absolute paradigm shift.
Completely. He's fighting a hilariously feudal battle against objective data, like screaming at algorithms the way we scream at automated customer service bots.
Right, it's just pointless.
But Maria isn't just telling him he's not a Spanish duke. She's telling him he descends from the very people the Spanish crown spent centuries trying to burn at the stake.
The irony is staggering. I mean, we often treat consumer DNA tests as, like, casual entertainment, right?
Totally, it's a fun gift.
Exactly. Finding out you have a small percentage of unanticipated ancestry is just a dinner party conversation for most people. But for someone whose entire psychological architecture relies on a strict narrative of imperial purity,
Yeah.
that data is actively destructive. It annihilates the story he uses to justify his place in the world.
And that biological reality introduces a massive logistical question. If his family has this deeply hidden Jewish ancestry, how does a family tree hide a secret that massive for hundreds of years?
That is the big question.
Right. And this takes us to the next confrontation in the living room, where the biological mechanisms of that secrecy completely break Quixote's brain. So there's a projector humming now, beaming the family tree onto the wall.
Nice visual.
Yeah, and Quixote is staring at it, visibly confused, and he demands, what sorcery is this? Why does the tree look like a spider web? Where are my majestic vertical lines?
A spider web, that's so accurate.
And Maria doesn't miss a beat. She tells him, that is pedigree collapse, my noble knight. Your great-great-grandmother married her first cousin. Her mother married her uncle and her father, also his second cousin. You don't have a family tree, Quixote. You have a family telephone pole.
A family telephone pole. That captures the reality of population genetics so well.
It's such a great phrase. Can you explain the math behind that?
Sure. Mathematically, pedigree collapse is universal inevitability. We all have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and it just scales exponentially. If you go back 30 generations, the math suggests you should have over 1 billion ancestors.
Which is way more than the global population at the time.
Exactly. It far exceeds the population of the Earth back then. So ancestral lines are forced to cross. The family tree is actually a diamond shape, you know? It expands outward and then inevitably collapses back in on itself.
Right, eventually everyone's tree gets tangled. But Quixote tries to reframe this tangle as a point of aristocratic pride.
Of course he has.
He pucks out his chest and says, a strategic necessity to keep the land undivided. It's what the European royals did. He's clinging to this idea that marrying your cousin is just a savvy real estate move.
And how does Maria react to that?
She shoots that down instantly, reminding him of how well that worked out for the Habsburgs and their famous genetic jawlines.
Ouch. Yeah, the Habsburg jaw is not something you want to emulate.
Definitely not. But then she shifts from the math to the history. She traces their lineage to a specific gateway ancestor, a woman named Rita Ramirez de Arellano y Martinez de Matos, born around 1730 in Cabo Rojo.
Okay, so a specific historical anchor.
Exactly. And Maria reveals that the reason this family kept marrying within a 3-mile radius wasn't to protect land or livestock, it was because they were harboring a terrifying secret.
And Quixote assumes it's something romantic.
Oh, always. Ever the romantic. He thinks they must have been hidden hidalgos, nobility waiting for their rightful return to power. But Maria drops the anchor. She says, no, they were conversos, crypto-Jews.
Wow. The term converso carries such an immense historical weight.
It really does.
Yeah.
Can you give a quick refresher on that context?
Yeah, so during the Spanish Inquisition, Jewish populations were given an impossible ultimatum by the Alhambra decree in 1492, basically. Convert to Catholicism, leave the empire with absolutely nothing, or be killed.
Just a horrific choice.
Truly, so many chose to convert publicly to survive, Becoming conversos while secretly maintaining their Jewish faith and traditions in private, they became crypto-Jews.
And Quixote reacts to this history exactly as you'd expect a man in denial to react.
Mhm.
He clutches his chest, he screams blasphemia, he claims it's internet gossip, modern revisionism, a glitch in the algorithm.
Total denial?
But Maria forces him to look at the projector. She traces Rita's lineage all the way back across the Atlantic to Alfonso Enriquez, the Admiral of Castile. Quixote is thrilled for a second, an admiral.
Finally, some royalty.
Right. But then Maria points to the admiral's mother. Her name was Yonati Paloma Bat Gedalea Ibn Yahya. Quixote starts waving his hands frantically, claiming it must be a clerical error, like a typo by a medieval scribe who drank too much sacramental wine.
Oh, he is just grasping at straws.
Completely. And Maria tells him her name was Paloma, abuelo. Yonati means dove in Hebrew. She was from the legendary Ibn Yahya dynasty of Portuguese and Spanish Jews, which means you, the grand knight-errant of Limpiza de Sangre, have Sephardic Jewish blood pumping through your very dramatic heart.
The Ibn Yahya family was incredibly prominent in medieval Iberia. They produced scholars, physicians, military leaders. Discovering a connection to that lineage is an extraordinary genealogical find.
People would be thrilled.
Right. Yet Quixote rejects it violently because accepting it means accepting that his ancestors were subjugated.
The psychological whiplash here is fascinating because he has undeniable proof projected on his wall. The DNA matches the genealogical records, which match the historical archives.
It's all right there.
I'm thinking about the psychology of cognitive dissonance. When someone's core identity is threatened by empirical evidence, the brain essentially treats that evidence as a physical threat.
That makes a lot of sense.
Quixote can't integrate this new information because if he acknowledges that his family's closed loop of marriages was actually a trauma response, a desperate attempt to avoid the Inquisition's spies, he loses his entire worldview.
Yeah, because the endogamy, the intense marrying within the group, that was a strict survival mechanism for conversos.
And so,
Well, in a panopticon society where the Inquisition had familiars or informants literally everywhere, you couldn't risk marrying an outsider. An outsider might notice that you refuse to eat pork, or that you bathe more frequently than the standard.
wow, even baiting was suspicious.
Oh, absolutely. Or that you change your linens on a Friday afternoon. Any of those mundane habits could lead to an accusation of Judaizing, which meant torture and the stake. Marrying your first cousin wasn't about land. It was about ensuring the person sleeping next to you wouldn't hand you over to the authorities.
That is just chilling. So the very thing Quixote uses to prove his aristocratic purity, this tight, closed bloodline, is actually the biological scar tissue of his family's historical terror.
Perfectly said.
Confronted with the reality that his ancestors lived in such fear they had to marry their uncles and cousins just to stay alive, Quixote doesn't feel empathy. He doesn't feel awe at their survival. He feels humiliated. And that humiliation weaponizes him.
Oh, defensive anger.
Exactly. He decides that if the data contradicts his identity, he must destroy the data.
Right, so he moves from internal cognitive dissonance to externalizing his denial. He attempts to reassert control over a reality that is completely slipping away from him.
And he does it in the most darkly funny yet unsettling way possible. He drops the sword and attacks the laptop keyboard.
Back to the digital witchcraft.
Right. He is frantic, typing with manic energy, muttering to himself, no, 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 I will slay this dragon. I have an editor on Family Search. I have contributor status. I will detach Paloma. I will click delete connection.
That is, it's hilarious, but also so sad.
Maria watches him, exasperated, telling him he can't just delete historical reality because it ruins his fantasy. Quixote just yells, watch me. Delete unlinked report profile for incorrect data. There, the line is broken. The Spanish crown is restored to my computer screen.
He genuinely believes that severing a digital link on a wiki restores a 15th century empire.
He really does. And Maria points out the absurdity of this. She tells him that because it's a collaborative global tree, 5 other genealogists are going to rebuild that link in 20 minutes. She calls it historical whack-a-mole.
Historical whack-a-mole. That is a perfect metaphor for the futility of his denial. The truth is decentralized now. He can no longer act as the sole gatekeeper of his family's narrative.
Yeah, he gets so desperate he threatens to purchase Ancestry.com just to control the servers.
Good luck with that.
Right. He declares, if the record does not exist in my digital possession, it does not exist in reality.
It's sheer solipsism.
But then, the comedy abruptly drains from the scene. Maria stops being sarcastic. She sighs, and she just sounds profoundly disappointed. She looks at him and says, wow, you really are behaving exactly like them.
Oh, that's a heart turn.
Quixote is taken aback. He asks, like who? The valiant defenders of the faith. And Maria drops a historical bombshell. She says, no, like Tomás de Torquemada.
Oh, wow. Bringing Torquemada into this living room fundamentally shifts the gravity of the argument.
For those who might not know, who was Torquemada?
Tomás de Torquemada was the first Grand Inquisitor of the Spanish Inquisition. He is the principal architect of the terror. He oversaw the torture, the forced conversions, and the eventual expulsion of the Jews from Spain. He was the ultimate enforcer of the limpieza de sangre purity laws.
But the crucial context Maria is leveraging here, which completely upends Quixote's understanding of history, is that Torquemada himself was of Converso descent.
Yes.
His uncle, Juan de Torquemada, had recognized Jewish roots before the family converted to Catholicism. How does a man with Jewish ancestry become the most ruthless persecutor of Jews in history?
It is a devastating example of internalized oppression and the psychology of overcompensation.
Overcompensation.
Yeah. In a society where your lineage makes you inherently suspect, the anxiety of being discovered as the other is intolerable. To alleviate that constant fear, some individuals violently align themselves with the oppressor.
So they try to outdo everyone else.
Right. Torquemada resolved his own identity crisis by becoming the most zealous persecutor imaginable. If he was the one lighting the fires, directing the torture, and writing the purity laws, no one could possibly question his own Christian purity. He shielded himself from the Inquisition by becoming the Inquisition.
He was overcompensating for his own perceived impurity.
Oh.
And Maria is pointing out that Quixote is running that exact same psychological program at his laptop.
Digitally, yeah.
She tells him, you have this beautiful, complex, resilient ancestry people who survived the Inquisition, crossed an ocean, settled in the mountains of San German, and kept their families safe for 500 years, and your first instinct is to build a digital bonfire and burn the record of their survival.
A digital bonfire? That is chilling.
Isn't it? The Inquisition burned human beings in libraries of books, and Quixote is attempting to burn the digital architecture of his own grandmother's memory. He's actively severing the link, basically telling his ancestors, your survival is inconvenient for my narrative, so you are dead to me.
He is betraying his own lineage to protect his ego. He is prioritizing a fabricated proximity to power over the actual resilience of his own flesh and blood.
And what makes it so pathetic is the stakes of his betrayal. He isn't facing a tribunal. His life isn't on the line like Torquemada's might have been. He explicitly admits why he's doing this. He yells, I am protecting our social standing. Do you know what the members of the Casino de Mayaguez would say if they found out we are them?
Wow.
He is willing to erase his ancestors from the book of life just so he doesn't get awkward looks at the local country club.
The Casino de Mayaguez is a crucial cultural touchstone here, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Puerto Rican society, historically, the casino was an elite social club. It was a gathering place for the wealthy landowners and the self-styled aristocracy of the island. It was an institution built entirely on gatekeeping.
So you had to be the right kind of person.
Exactly. Membership signaled that you had the right pedigree, the right European features, the right last name. Quixote's terror of the casino finding out is a fear of social death. He is terrified of losing his VIP pass to a club that only exists to look down on others.
The absolute absurdity of his vanity is laid bare when Maria points out that because of endogamy, half the island is related to this same gateway ancestor. The secret he is guarding is an open secret encoded into the DNA of Western Puerto Rico.
He is acting as a gatekeeper for a gate that fell down a century ago.
Beautifully put. And this brings us to the emotional rock bottom of the play. The intellectual debate about wiki edits and genetics ends, and the sheer staggering cruelty of what Quixote is doing is finally spoken out loud. The soundscape of the play shifts to a cold, echoing wind.
Setting the mood.
Yeah, and Quixote starts physically shaking. He asks, weakly, why is it so cold in here? Turn down the air conditioner, Maria. And Maria, stripping away all the irony, replies, it's not the AC, Abrelo. It's the chill of betrayal.
Oh, the confrontation here is no longer about facts. It is about morality.
Quixote tries to defend himself, falling back on his chivalric vocabulary. He claims he is maintaining order, acting as a knight. But Maria dismantles that defense completely.
How does she do it?
She gets angry, and her voice is so strong here, she tells him, think about what you're doing. You are taking the trauma of your ancestors, people who had to hide their names, drop their customs, and live in constant fear of being burned at the stake, and instead of honoring their struggle, you're acting as their digital warden.
Digital ward.
You are policing their memory. You are erasing their names from the book of life so you can feel pure in the eyes of a Spanish empire that collapsed a century ago.
That is so powerful. He has picked up the keys to the cell that his ancestors were locked in, and he's locking them back inside, long after the original oppressors have turned to dust.
Exactly. The oppressor is gone. But the mechanism of oppression has been internalized and passed down.
By deleting Paloma from the family tree, he is executing the final goal of the Inquisition, which was the complete erasure of Converso history.
And the booming grandiosity of Don Quixote finally collapses under the weight of that accusation. The stage directions note a heavy thud, like a massive book dropping to the floor.
The armor falling.
His voice cracks, and he admits his core wound. He says softly, I just wanted to belong to something noble, a true knight of the realm. He equated nobility entirely with the European imperial definition, kings, dukes, and blood purity.
Because he believed that his worth was tethered to his proximity to historical power. Nobility, in his mind, was the absence of struggle. It was being the one who dictates terms, not the one who hides.
The very common human flaw, though, isn't it? We want to be associated with the victors of history, not the victims. We want the clean, unblemished narrative.
We all want the fairy tale.
Right. But Maria offers him a completely different philosophical paradigm. She leans in, speaking not to a delusional knight, but to her grandfather. She says, Abuelo, surviving the Inquisition is noble. Keeping your family alive through 500 years of exile, isolation, hurricanes, and plagues is noble. Paloma ibn Yahya is a queen of survival. Why is a fictional Spanish duke more valuable to you than a real-life Jewish survivor?
Wow. It is a profound redefinition of what makes a lineage great. Nobility is not a static state of genetic purity. It is the active endurance of immense suffering. It is the resilience to carry a family line forward against impossible odds.
It makes me think of finding an artifact in your family's attic. Imagine you find a diary. It's battered, the binding is falling apart, the pages are stained with salt water and blood. It chronicles how your great-grandmother survived famine, crossed an ocean in the hull of a ship, and outsmarted people who wanted to kill her.
An incredible document.
It is a raw, undeniable testament to human grit. What does Quixote do in this scenario? He looks at that diary, frowns, and throws it into the paper shredder because it doesn't match the glossy, completely fabricated PR brochure he printed for himself at a copy shop. He is discarding a genuine epic of human survival in favor of a cheap fantasy.
And the fantasy is seductive precisely because it requires nothing of him. A fictional Spanish duke is a status symbol, you know? Doesn't carry the weight of inherited trauma.
That's right.
Embracing a real-life survivor as an ancestor forces you to acknowledge pain. It forces you to identify with the marginalized and the hunted rather than the powerful. For a man whose entire social identity at the casino is built on looking down at the marginalized, identifying with them is a terrifying proposition.
But the argument changes him. Maria has cornered him logically and morally. But as we know, knowing you're logically wrong rarely makes you change your behavior.
Unfortunately true.
It's a deeply emotional sensory memory that finally shatters his armor. The cold industrial hum of the laptop fades out, replaced by a warm acoustic guitar melody playing a Ladino lullaby. Quixote is no longer fighting the machine. He is staring at the screen, quietly reading the names of his ancestors.
That's a beautiful shift in tone.
He whispers, Rita, daughter of Ana Maria, daughter of Juan Sprete. And Maria asks him a question that brings the entire sweeping history of the Sephardic diaspora down to a single room in western Puerto Rico.
What does she ask?
She asked, do you remember what your grandmother used to do on Friday nights? In her little house in Cabo Rojo. Quixote's tone shifts, becomes gentle, steeped in memory. He says, she would sweep the floor towards the center of the room, never towards the door. And she always lit 2 candles in the back room.
Oh, wow.
He goes on, I asked her why once. She said, Es la costumbre de la familia, nene. No preguntes. It's the family custom, boy. Don't ask.
The introduction of those specific sensory details is breathtaking. These are not random quirks of an eccentric grandmother. They are the historical fingerprints of a hidden people, preserved through action when words became too dangerous to speak.
Let's dive deep into the mechanics of this, because understanding the why and the how of these specific actions really reveals the sheer terror these people lived under.
Yeah.
Let's start with the candles. Why 2 candles, specifically on a Friday night, hidden in a back room?
Lighting 2 candles just before sundown on Friday is the foundational Jewish ritual to welcome the Sabbath.
Right.
For a converso family living under the watchful eye of the Inquisition, practicing this openly was an immediate death sentence. It was the most visible marker of Judaizing. So the women, and it was almost universally the women, the matriarchs, who kept the secret traditions alive within the domestic sphere, they would light the candles in a back room away from the windows.
To hide the light.
Exactly. They hid the light from the street, shielding their faith from the neighbors who might report them to the authorities for a bounty.
And what about the sweeping? Sweeping dirt toward the center of the room instead of out the door seems so counterintuitive.
The sweeping is a direct, visceral response to the paranoia of living in a surveillance state. In a typical home, you naturally sweep dirt out the front door into the street, right?
Yeah, of course.
But if you were a converso, you didn't want anything crossing your threshold that could be scrutinized. You didn't want neighbors noticing your schedule, for instance, noticing that you were specifically cleaning your home on a Friday afternoon before the Sabbath began.
Because that's a pattern.
Exactly. If you swept dirt out the door on a Friday, an informant might note that pattern. So you swept inwards. You literally hid the evidence of your existence within the center of the house. You contained your life entirely within the walls.
The terror must have been so all-encompassing that it altered the physical mechanics of how they cleaned their floors. And here is the truly staggering part. By the time we get to Quixote's grandmother in Cabo Rojo, in the mid-20th century, the Inquisition is long over. The tribunals are gone.
The threat is gone.
The threat of being burned at the stake vanished centuries ago. But she is still sweeping inward. She is still lighting the candles in the back room.
She doesn't even know why she's doing it. When asked, she just says, "It's the family custom, don't ask." The original theological context and the immediate physical danger were entirely erased by time and fear, but the action survived.
It's incredible.
It is the sociology of hidden groups operating at the level of epigenetics and muscle memory. 500 years of crypto-Jewish tradition bypassed the conscious mind, bypassed scripture, bypassed spoken language, and lodged itself directly into the hands of the grandmothers. The trauma and the resilience became a physical reflex.
It gives me literal goosebumps. And Maria points this out to him. She says, that was Paloma Abuelo. That was 500 years of candle smoke traveling from Seville to San German. You can't delete that. It's in your DNA. It's in the way you sweep. It's in the way you remember.
She's telling him that his ancestry isn't just data on a server.
Exactly. He can click delete on a wiki page all day long, but he cannot delete the muscle memory of his own grandmother. To deny the data is to deny the reality of the woman who raised him.
She forces him to realize that the history he is trying to erase isn't abstract. It is intimately tied to the people he loved. He cannot reject his converso ancestors without rejecting his own grandmother.
And that is what finally breaks the armor. He pauses. His hand hovers over the laptop touchpad. He whispers, "If I restore the link, if I put Paloma back," and Maria says gently, "then you stop running. You stop being the inquisitor of your own blood."
It is a profound surrender. He chooses truth over the mythology. He chooses to connect with his actual lineage rather than isolate himself inside a fabrication.
He clicks the button. He restores the link on the database. And then he lets out this long, quiet sigh, and the humor finally comes back into his voice, but it's a grounded humor now. He says, "The members of the Casino de Mayagüez are going to have a fit."
He acknowledges the social cost, but he finally realizes how incredibly small and insignificant that elite club is compared to the vast epic history of his real family line.
And Maria, with a real smile in her voice, replies, "Let them. We'll bring the chala," or some pen sobao.
Pen sobao.
Yeah, it's a traditional, slightly sweet, very soft Puerto Rican bread. She's offering a beautiful cultural synthesis, substituting the traditional Jewish Sabbath bread with the bread of their island.
It's a perfect image of the past and the present making peace. The identities don't have to be mutually exclusive anymore.
The final exchange is just a beautiful button on the whole journey. Quixote asks, "Maria, how do you say purity of blood in Hebrew?" And Maria replies, "We don't, abuelo. We just say lusham, to life."
Oh, that's gorgeous.
We hear the clink of 2 beer cans, the Spanish guitar swells, and the play ends.
To life. It is the ultimate rejection of the Inquisition's death cult and its obsession with genetic purity. It's an embrace of the messy, tangled, resilient reality of simply existing and surviving.
What a phenomenal piece of writing. We started with a man violently attacking his own genetics with a sword, treating his DNA like an invading army because it threatened his pristine aristocratic fairy tale.
Yeah, a lot of ground covered.
We navigated through the biological realities of pedigree collapse, unpacked the historical terror of the conversos, and looked at the dark psychology of the Torquemada complex, how marginalized people can become the digital wardens of their own trauma. And we arrived at this beautiful, quiet acceptance, realizing that true nobility is found in the muscle memory of a grandmother sweeping a floor and lighting candles in the dark.
It really challenges you to completely reevaluate what you consider valuable in your own history.
Exactly. And that brings me right back to you. Think about your own family lore. Every family has them. The stories passed down over Thanksgiving dinners, the quiet pride and a supposed connection to a historical figure or a specific homeland.
We all have the myths.
We do. How much of your family tree is a curated fairy tale? What incredible stories of messy, complicated survival might be hiding behind closed doors or locked away in the secrets your ancestors were too afraid to share?
And perhaps more intriguingly, look at the mundane, unexplained habits of your grandparents, the things they do just because it's the family custom. What forgotten histories, what ancient fears or triumphs are they unknowingly acting out in their kitchens and living rooms?
Which leaves us with a final lingering thought. If our daily habits and our DNA can silently carry the memories, the fears, and the survival tactics of 500 years ago, what modern, seemingly insignificant habits are we encoding right now?
That's a deep question.
How is the anxiety or the resilience of our current moment going to show up in the muscle memory of our descendants half a millennium from today? When the X-ray machine of the future looks back at us, what ghost stories will our data tell? Think about that. Until next time, keep diving deep.